And we're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Happy Thursday. My name is Ruby from the Feed Real Institute, and I am here with Hanna Mandelbaum from Evermore Pet Food. She's the co-CEO and fairy dog mother. Oh my gosh, I love that. Of Evermore. And she's joining us today to talk about a lot of stuff. But one of the big topics is humane washing. And I can't wait to learn more about that. Thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to get into this.
Yeah, me too. So Hanna is going to be one of our sponsors at the Feed Rail Summit this October here in San Diego. Oh my gosh, it has been crazy. And leading up to this summit, meeting with all of our sponsors who are just teaching us so much about what they do, so many things that I had no idea about. I am just prepared to learn so much from you. We have a few people joining in, and while you guys are trickling in, please tell us where you're joining from. Would love to know. And for anyone who has been on a live with us before, typically we chat for about 30 minutes or so, and then we go into your questions. So if you got to run, drop your question into the comment. We will do our best to get to it in the second half of our show. And you can watch that replay later here on Facebook or on our YouTube channel. All right, so let's jump into it. We are diving into ingredient quality, deceptive claims. First and foremost, before we even do that, tell us about Evermore. Tell us about what you do.
Sure. So we make a gently cooked food for dogs. I know there's like a lot of those these days. But we started in 2009, and we have always been really focused on ingredient quality. So for us, what that means is high welfare protein sources, things like grass-fed beef and lamb, pastured eggs. We're actually moving to pastured chicken really soon, so that's very exciting. But at the moment, we're using free range organic. And then we have all organic produce and some other organic supporting ingredients. So what we really try to do is focus on a high quality product.
That's awesome. Pasture raised poultry is so difficult to source. That's amazing that you've been able to do that.
We're starting on our next really soon, really soon. But yeah, we've been trying for something like 8 years. And we've had so many false starts, like people who it seemed like it was going to work out, having trouble getting the volume. I'm sure, being what you're doing, you totally must know.
I get it. So how long have you been with Evermore? You're the co-CEO?
Co-founder. I mean, I've been doing this the whole time, 14 years. So it's been a minute.
That's awesome. Well, I'm glad that you were able to join us, but let's jump into humane washing. What does that even mean?
Sure. So you've probably heard about greenwashing, this way that companies present themselves as more eco-friendly than they are. Well, in the past, since we've been doing this, there's been such a growing consumer demand for higher animal welfare products. And unfortunately, with this demand, the market is following in a lot of good ways, but then a lot of companies say, hey, people want this. How can we make it seem like our product is this when It isn't? And what that translates to is a lot of claims that you'll see on packaging that make it seem like things are high welfare, but really they're just the same low welfare factory farm stuff. And before we really dive into this, I just want to say that no matter what you're doing, if you are feeding fresh, no matter what, like even if it's not high welfare, you are doing better for your animal than anything processed. So I don't want anyone to feel bad about what they're doing. I'm just here to give you the information to empower you to make better choices.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that.
Yeah, I feel like it's really important to start like that because it's just, you can't really, I think it's become very black and white. I mean, a lot of the claims that are made, and I wrote down a whole list this morning because there's too many to remember, but you'll see things like ranch raised, cage-free chicken, and I'll get into like why all of those are total, pardon my French, bullshit. But the problem is people don't know this because a lot of the popular ways that animal welfare is highlighted are from groups that really want to encourage people to be fully plant-based, which I do think it's an admirable thing for humans to want to be fully plant-based. don't think it's admirable for our dogs and cats, but I really do think that that's an admirable goal. However, the way this is presented is like, this is all horrible, which it is. But you should not eat meat at all,
Right.
without really getting into the fact like, hey, there's like nuance here. There's ways to consume animals, giving them better lives until they get to that point.
Yeah,
So
and I think part of this discussion, it's more than just informing pet parents of what to look for and perhaps what to avoid, but it's also, we can make changes in this industry with our buying power, right?
oh,
So if there are things that people are not doing right, they're not doing it the right way, we shouldn't support them and really force the industry in a different direction.
absolutely. And this isn't just, this isn't just about the pet industry. Everything we're going to talk about doesn't just apply to pet food. It also applies to your food. And in a lot of ways, these claims were being made on food for human consumption before they were being made on pet food. So what I hope people can take away is just that, it just things to help you make better choices across the board. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna just read a list of things that I put together that can be highly deceptive, and then we can go through why. And
Yeah,
I know,
and before you get started, I'm curious if anyone in our audience has even heard that term humane washing. I knew what it was immediately when you sent over the topic, but I was like, no one is talking about this at all. So drop a comment if you guys have heard of this or not. Would love to know.
yeah, it's very new. So sure, let's even the term humane itself can be humane washing. All natural. It's not really a humane term. And I don't think people realize that. Poultry that's hormone free. You can laugh at that one. Ocean raised salmon, I saw recently. Is that a good one? Ocean raised. Um, Meats that are pasture raised, it can be a really confusing thing. Um, uh, Cage free chicken. That's a really good one. Family farmed anything. Ranch
Mm,
raised. And even locally sourced can be deceptive, right? And that's just like the tip of the iceberg. And in a way, sometimes organic can come with a human halo too, and they're not necessarily the same thing. So we can go through all of that too.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
please.
So I guess I'm going to start with the poultry claims. And poultry is kind of an interesting thing. A lot of people who want to be vegetarian or think that they want to make more ethical choices think that cutting out red meat and going with poultry is somehow like a kinder thing to do. Unfortunately, poultry and also pigs are, they suffer the worst conditions of the animals that are farmed in the US. We slaughter 9 billion chickens a year.
Hmm.
That's pretty crazy. And the reason that the term cage free is really deceptive is that all chickens in the US are raised outside of cages. We do not raise broiler chickens in the US in cages, but you would not believe the number of like pet food companies and packaging that say cage free chicken. Basically, you're just saying chicken.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And was it always that way? Did we have broiler chickens before?
Yeah, broiler chickens are just the sort of chickens that we eat. That just means basically chicken that's raised for meat. And we can get into genetics too, because this is where pasture comes into being a difference. So the vast majority of chickens raised in the US are a breed called Cornish cross. We slaughter them at 8 weeks of age. And basically, they're designed to grow as quickly as possible and incredibly large breasts. Or yeah, that's they're basically the LA chickens. But so because Americans, we really have an appetite for chicken breast. People really like that lean meat, so that's where they're designed to put it on. And unfortunately, this creates cardiac problems. It makes it so they can't even stand up. Their bodies basically become a prison.
Yeah.
And
And we didn't always have an appetite for breast, for lean meat. There was that, oh, dark meat is too fatty, or red meat has, too much cholesterol. And that's why everyone started flocking towards the breast meat. And
Yeah.
that's how that happened.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, I like dark meat better, but it is so much more rich in nutrients to have that dark meat. So it's the good news is that there does seem to be an awareness shift there, and there are initiatives like the Better Chicken Commitment. I don't know if you've heard about that,
Yes, yes.
where things are being driven back towards higher welfare breeds. That's part of the Better Chicken Commitment. And for everyone out there who probably doesn't know what that is, the Better Chicken Commitment was a set of guidelines put together by 10 animal welfare organizations, and including like the ASPCA, Mercy for Animals. I'm not going to be able to list the rest of them, and it was just creating like minimum standards for how chickens could be raised, and one of them entailed switching over breeds. There's also like a square footage requirement, things about their slaughter. I would say that this represents a floor and not a
Sure.
ceiling. Like this
Yep.
is like the bare minimum of what people should be doing. So um, we already pretty much meet the Better Chicken Commitment, so pretty excited about that.
Awesome.
Actually, our full breed move is going to happen when we transition to fully pastured chicken
Nice.
pretty soon. Very excited about that.
Well, and also some of the bigger poultry companies are making the Better Chicken Commitment. I think Purdue is on
Yeah,
that.
Purdue. Here's the thing about that I just want to point out. They're not making the Better Chicken Commitment for all of their lines. Basically, they're saying that this is available. And the Better Chicken Commitment really does seem like it's leaning on manufacturers, like, like Evermore, like, and even bigger companies like McDonald's who've taken it. Basically, what they're trying to do is have us use our buying power to get these bigger companies to provide more of that.
Right.
We'll
Right.
see how it goes. However, taking the commitment doesn't mean that you're meeting it. There's an organization called Mercy for Animals that just put out a report. They're actually going to do another report in November, following up with how are these companies doing the Better Chicken Commitment? Like how are these companies doing with it? And we got an A, of course.
Nice.
But the reality is a lot of companies, even ones that you would hope that would be doing better, are doing abysmally. So
Yeah. And I don't know if this is part of what you're going to go into today, but there are companies that come in and audit, these third parties. And um, for some of the smaller companies, they might say it's out of reach for a third party to come audit them. And so even though they're meeting these standards, they don't qualify because they can't afford to have somebody come out. What are your thoughts on that?
well, there's two versions of the Better Chicken Commitment, right? And one of them requires GAP certification, and the other one requires, you can use different third-party auditors. I'm just going to say we're a tiny company operating on a shoestring budget, and we are GAP certified for our poultry. And I'm just going to put it out there: it does not cost that much. It's
Okay.
like 5 cents a case or something, like something ridiculous like that. So I do think that that's not the best argument. That said, just in general with certifications, I don't think that they're a be all end all. And I also don't think that you need to be signed on to a commitment like that to be doing the right thing.
Sure.
I think that as long as there's a level of transparency and as long as you are doing the right thing, that's really what matters. But that's where consumers really need to hold companies accountable.
Yep.
I will say, thanks to all of this humane washing that's been happening, we as a company did make the decision to just publicly disclose our vendors, which is not something most companies do. And we were cagey about it for a while. Not cagey, but like, you don't necessarily want to share your sourcing because you're afraid that somebody else is going to swoop in and get it.
Yep.
Or you're afraid that, like, what if we can't stick with this vendor forever? Like, what if we have to switch vendors? Which, you know what, you can just share that you switch vendors. But we
Yeah, but
realized,
there's, a lot of people don't realize it's really hard out there, and it only takes one really big company to come through and basically steal your contract.
yeah,
Uh,
it really can be like that. I mean, we're really lucky. We have some really strong partnerships. We've worked with some of the companies that we work with for 8 years in California, like some of our protein vendors. Some we've worked with. I mean, there are vendors for some other ingredients that we've worked with since we started in 2009. Yeah, so it's pretty. It's all about. I think it's about the strength of the relationships that you build. But I think another thing people don't realize when it comes to claims is that a lot of companies, if they're working with co-packs, they don't even necessarily know where their meat is coming from.
right.
You probably know this. Like you probably get contacted by like sketchy ingredient brokers all the time,
All the time.
who all the time, and they're like, "Yeah, this is grass fed or pastured. Like it's been frozen for 2 years, but you know you can get it super cheap." You
Yep.
know.
Yeah. Can you talk about that a little bit? What is co-packing?
Sure. So, we don't own our own facility. We work with a USDA human food facility. They're a small family run kitchen in Southern California. And usually, it's basically third party manufacturing. So, and this is very unusual. We buy our ingredients and send them to the kitchen and they prepare them. So we're in charge of all of our own sourcing. Most facilities will not let you do your own sourcing. Mm-hmm. What they do is they will, for your recipes, buy things, charge a margin on them. Still would probably cost us less than if we were buying our own ingredients, but that's part of how they make their money. They get all of your ingredients for you. And we will obviously not give up control of our own supply chain. But the reality is that most pet food companies kind of work this way, at least in our space. I remember talking to a kitchen and they took like one look at our recipe and they were like, "Yeah, you're really going to need to simplify this." We have something like 19 ingredients, but they're, and it's like, we're not changing our recipe just to scale our production.
No, for sure. And, a lot of people really just don't even realize that companies are using co-packers. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I just think that it should be disclosed. A lot of times I've seen a very popular company, recently popular, who is going to their kitchen or a co-packer that they use and making it seem like they're the ones in there making the food, just like, on the days that they tour or they're QCing their product. And it's just deceiving. It's just, you should be able to ask your food manufacturer, are you guys making the product yourself? If not, are you using a co-packer? How does that all work? Rather than sort of going in and pretending that they're the ones making everything and shipping it out on their own.
Absolutely. We've done a kitchen video, but we make it pretty clear that it's them and not us. And I will say most co-packers won't even let you come in and get on the floor like more than once. It's like they want to learn your process and then they're like, "Peace, we out," we're really lucky. Our company, our kitchen, it's just, they're really warm. We come, we throw a breakfast for them once a year. Allison, my partner, who really is, I like to say she's the heart of the company and I'm the mouth, and she gets really mad when I say that because we're both the heart, but she does our sourcing and she goes down really regularly just to check it out. And she loves production. I do too, but it's really cold.
Why did you choose a kitchen in Southern California? Were they the only ones that were willing to make your recipe, or how did that happen?
Well, we originally started on the East Coast as a company. My partner and I met in Brooklyn, but the love of her life was in California, where she had previously lived. So she moved out. She's actually in the Bay Area, and we interviewed a lot of kitchens. First of all, when we moved, it was hard to find kitchens. Like 8 years ago, when we moved production to California, nobody wanted to touch dog food. It took talking to a lot of kitchens to find someone who wanted to make dog food and who would source, who would let us do our own sourcing. Like that combination of things made it really hard. But I have to say, we landed on just some amazing human beings to work with, and it really worked out. But also, California is amazing for sourcing. right? We can get organic produce year round. Most of our meat comes from California. It's just a really great place to be for food production.
Yeah,
So.
for sure. So when you guys are sourcing your ingredients, like what specifically are you looking for?
Sure. Well, for the meat, obviously, as high welfare as possible, which I got to get back to those claims.
I know.
But for the meat, as high welfare as possible, for our produce, all of it's like certified organic. We obviously want it to be, as domestic as possible, as close to our kitchen as possible. And just like vendors who are super communicative, and we want to work directly with our vendors. We don't go through like brokers or middlemen. So that's basically how we source. And anyone we work with has to be able to answer like a buttload of questions.
Sure.
They will get grilled, and we need to be able to learn every aspect of every ingredient. We give the same level of care and consideration to the cranberries that go into one recipe as we do to our meat. It's really every ingredient is important. But let's get back to those humane washing claims. So. But I talked about cage-free chicken. Let's go to eggs, because I did put the chicken first and now the egg, but it could have been reversed and the age-old question. But we did put chickens ahead on the ingredient list. So eggs, there's that same like cage-free thing, and you'll see cage-free a lot. Cage-free means 2 square feet of space per chicken. That's not a whole lot of room. When you're looking at a pastured egg, it's 108 square feet per chicken. And one of the advantages of going high welfare is that there's a nutritional difference, right? Pastured eggs have so much more vitamin D. They have a better omega ratio. And we didn't really read much about this, but we also found that they had way more choline. We used to have to supplement with choline for our poultry formulas, and we do a lot of lab testing. So we tested a lot of things after we moved from certified humane. It was like certified humane to cage free. We can get certifications later. To fully pastured eggs, which, by the way, we were the first dog food company, the first human. Like, we were the only company ordering bulk pastured eggs, and to our knowledge, for both vendors that we worked with for pasture, every vendor, we've actually used a couple of different pasture vendors over the years. We've always been the only like manufacturer ordering pastured eggs in bulk. Like, the rest of them pretty much went to restaurants and grocery stores.
Yeah.
So we're proud of that. I mean, like, I don't want to sound like I'm tooting my own horn a lot, but like, we're really proud of the work that we do. Anyway.
You absolutely should be. You should. That's why I bring people on here. A lot of times I can't tell you the number of requests I get, like, can you review my product or my food? And I'm like, why don't you just come on and talk about it?
It's been a while since I've done a live. This is fun. But anyway, so, pastured eggs, when you look at that, it's just so much better for the chicken, and it's so much better for your pet. And I also forgot to mention that pastured chickens as well, they also have better omega ratios and a lot of better vitamins and minerals. And part of that is because I just want to do some fun chicken facts. Chickens will eat pretty much anything. They will eat pretty much anything. I have a farm around the corner, and I was horrified the first time I saw a chicken running down the street with a mouse in its mouth with all the other chickens chasing it. And this is even more horrific. I was even more horrified. One day I was like walking down the street with my dog, and there was like 1 million chickens in the road. And I was like, what's going on here? And then I realized there was a chicken that had not been too lucky, because these chickens are like a little too free range and had been hit by a car. And all of the chickens were eating the dead chicken.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is like too out there for the show, but it's just a story that like I can't resist telling. Just to prove chickens are omnivores, right? So they should have access to the outside and to be able to eat bugs and mice and hopefully not other chickens. But
I mean, I'm a new chicken mom, and
you have chickens?
I have chickens, and I will say, number one, the eggs taste so much better. I will never go back to store-bought eggs, like, ever. Number one. Number two, my partner Turk, he's like, you got to feed them meat every now and then, like whatever is in that organic feed is great, but we give them a lot of table scraps. And I do notice when they have meat, whether it's like sometimes leftover organ meat, chicken, I do feed them chicken, whatever, red meat, they actually tend to produce more eggs in a short amount of time. So sometimes like that week, we'll see 2 eggs a day instead of one.
Huh. That's
Yeah.
really interesting. Did you know chickens are the closest living relative to Tyrannosaurus Rex?
I did not know that. So they are
That
literally
they're
dinosaurs.
literally, I mean, we knew like dinosaurs evolved to birds, but like chickens are like the OG, like you want to see it at the museum dinosaur. So,
Wow.
while we're on the chicken topic, I did forget to mention free range and what that means. And free range chicken just means it has access to the outdoors. It can be a tiny little door in like just the densest factory farm imaginable. Then it can be called free range. So
Yeah,
that's another point I just wanted to get across.
for
So
sure. Yeah. I'd like to mention something as well. You know, a lot of people are fearful that any undercooked egg or undercooked chicken that they consume is going to have salmonella in it or some sort of pathogenic bacteria. But so much has to do with how the animals are raised. If you can imagine, they're all, tightly packed into a very small location, and one or two of them get sick, picks up some sort of bacteria or virus, that's going to spread really, really fast. And now we know from our experience with COVID, you have this sort of 6-foot rule for very good reason, because if you've got more space and air circulation between you, less likely that that sickness is going to get passed between those animals.
yeah. This poor avian flu chicken. I mean, that's like a whole horrible thing. I don't even
I
want
know.
to get into like the details of that right now. Okay,
Yeah.
there was one more. Oh, I guess that's actually, it's a good segue to things like antibiotics and hormones.
Yes.
Very good segue. So chickens that a hormone-free poultry is a claim that we see a lot. And the thing is, federal law prohibits the use of hormones in any poultry raising. So if someone does make that claim, they actually are legally required in tiny letters to put at the bottom of their packaging. They actually have to say federal law, prohibits the use. But they still think that it's like somehow a selling point for consumers, and this just comes down to like read the small print.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And antibiotics, do you know something like, I forget what the statistic was. It was something crazy, like 70%. I don't, nobody quote me on that, but it's a really, really high number of the antibiotics used worldwide are used in animal agriculture.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
it's like,
I was surprised.
yeah, it is a huge number. And like, I feel like it was like, it was somewhere in the 2/3 range. Again, don't quote me, but it was really, really high. And that there's all kind of problems with that. In addition, it's like used prophylactically to be able to have that many birds together, but it's getting into our water supply, it's screwing up the soil biome. It's
Yep.
just this rampant antibiotics use, in addition to being a welfare issue, is an issue for human and animal health.
Yeah. No, you have a great point there. I was talking to Poppy Phillips the other day. Yes, there's antibiotics in our water supply, but there's also testosterone, especially here in Southern California. And we're all like, where?
That's why everyone in California is so jacked.
Right?
Yeah. So that's actually because that's a good way to move on to the cows, because there is no hormone in poultry production, but there is in cattle production. So really good segue. Let's get back to my cow claims. There's a really good one: ranch raised. All cattle are raised on ranches. Ranch just literally means, ruminant operation. And, it should be, where they're moving around, but cows are raised on ranches. That's what we call them. Family farm.
I've not seen that one, but
yeah. Oh, I've seen ranch raised. Like, I've definitely seen ranch raised. Family farmed, you probably see a lot.
yes.
And I don't think people realize that most of the farms in the US are smaller operations that are contracting for larger companies. So again, most farms are technically family farms
Mhm.
that are contracted to produce for larger companies. So they can still be a family factory farm.
Right.
It doesn't say what type of family farm. Locally sourced, and I do think local sourcing is really important, but again, that says nothing about animal welfare. These, like, a lot of these can apply to poultry too.
Yeah.
And this one, you see all natural a lot. People don't realize that all natural has to do with the meat, and it has to do with what happens to the meat, the processing amount. So it has to do with putting additives in the meat, and it has to do with how heavily processed it is, like sausage in general, with nitrates and all that stuff. That's not all natural, but that has nothing to do with the life of the animal. It has nothing to do with whether or not there are antibiotics and hormones. And so, I mean, that's not necessarily deceptive. I mean, I think it's intrinsically deceptive, but people just like really don't know what that means. And grass fed, that just changed. The USDA just released this year new rules on that, but it used to be, and I'm sure that there's probably a grace period with labeling, because there usually is an absurdly long grace period.
Mhm.
But it used to be that grass fed just had to do with if cows ever ate grass, or but now, and you'd have to disclaim it, or if you did have 100% grass fed operation, you'd have to say grass fed, grass finished, because
Mhm.
it used to be that a grass fed cow could be grass fed for most of its life, which it usually is. Almost all cows in the US are raised on pasture, right? They're actually, and this is where we get to that welfare issue where I said that cows are higher welfare
Mhm.
than chicken. It's because they are raised on pasture. Grass is the cheapest thing you can feed a cow. Let them feed off the land. And most cows, get the opportunity to be with their mothers, to get to roam around. So until that point where they're going to a feedlot, they generally have pretty good lives, which is more than you can say for a lot of farmed animals.
How long, grass-fed cows that end up becoming grain-fed towards the end of their life, how long are there any rules on how long they could be on
It's
the grains?
it's usually, well, now they've actually changed it, as I was saying. So now if the grass-fed claim is being made, the cow has to stay on pasture, which is really awesome. That's it. It's a new thing. The USDA did acknowledge that, hey, humane washing is a problem, so they started raising their standards. But it's so before cows go to feedlot, whether it's under the old system where grass-fed claims were being made, or just now with standard grain finished cows, basically it would be 6 months before slaughter they would go to the feedlot. And cows, there's a big range in terms of the age of slaughter. It can start at 18 months, it can go up to 5 years. It just really depends on the practices of the rancher.
Sure.
But yeah, it would be about 6 months on a feedlot. And the issues with feedlots, one, they're dense operations. They often have concrete floors, so they're lower welfare in that way. Cows are not designed to eat grains and corn, right? So this can cause all kinds of GI issues. It reduces their nutritional value, and it also, it can create like bacterial problems. It can create these overgrowths because their digestive system is not working the way it's supposed to.
Right.
Yeah, and hormones with cows. That was our segue, and we didn't even get into that. They're given so cows grow really fast and they grow really big. And if you think about that, that's a welfare issue. Because I don't know if this happened with you. I didn't grow very fast as a kid, like kind of short. But a lot of growing pains are a thing. And imagine if you're being forced to grow faster than is natural. That is painful
Sure.
for the
And
animal.
weigh, nearly a ton at that.
Yeah. Yeah. So these are all interventions that are bad for the animal.
Mhm.
This is an interesting humane washing claim that everyone is going to be pretty surprised by. And it's not necessarily humane washing, but organic. And this is both for chicken and beef. People assume that organic means high welfare, and it doesn't necessarily. They're distinct.
Mm-hmm.
There are sort of husbandry practices that the USDA organic certification includes, but there are so many loopholes in them that organically raised meat can almost be like indistinguishable from
Sure.
those factory farms. So just because it's organic doesn't mean it's humane. A
Yep.
lot of times, organic food will also have humane certifications. So that's really what you want to look for. The interesting flip side of that coin is humane meat is closer is generally almost the same as organic in a lot of ways, because most of the humane standards sort of eliminate things like antibiotics and hormones and the things that make meat, you know, there's a lot of overlap. One of the places where there isn't necessarily the overlap is GMO feed,
Mm-hmm.
but otherwise, most humane standards encompass the same thing that organic standards do from sort of a wholesomeness standpoint.
Well, and when you're talking about the welfare standards, you're trying to raise the animal in their most natural state, right? You're not force feeding them or putting them into um, situations that they wouldn't regularly put themselves into. Therefore, they're going to eat things that are more natural to them.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think you just put that a lot better than I did. um,
Good. Is there anything else on your list?
let's see. I think that those were USDA grading. I think that that's really an important one. People somehow, and I'm also getting into quality indicators here too, not just humane indicators. People think that USDA grading has something to do with like meat quality, but it really, in a way that would affect animal food, like in a way that means it's like somehow more human grade, right?
Mm-hmm.
What USDA grading means, it actually has to do with the marbleization on the meat. So a USDA grade A meat is actually going to be fattier than a grass-fed meat, and that's why people are a little bit confused. Like grass-fed, it's not USDA graded, and the reason grass-fed meat is generally not USDA graded is because it's leaner. So that's just something I wanted to mention. That's kind of related, but not really necessarily humane. It's just something that people are really confused about a lot. So
Yeah,
I want to put that out
and
there.
and it rightly so, because there is terminology that we were not at all familiar with just a few decades ago, and now it's like you can't follow it. You have no idea what you're looking for. But so, this was really great. This was super helpful because now you've sort of pointed out all the things that really don't mean anything, and you're just
Yeah, and it's not companies lying to you, right? Like they're telling you the truth.
yeah,
Yeah, it's ranch raised, it's hormone free, it's whatever. I mean, they're not lying, but what they're operating under the assumption that the consumer doesn't know enough to realize
right.
that it's BS. Which, first of all, I think that's really condescending. Right? Like this is a company talking down to you, operating under the assumption that you're dumb.
Yep.
And I mean, the problem is there just is such a lack of education there. I don't think anyone who falls for this is necessarily, dumb. I can't believe I used that word, but I don't think it's just like there's a lack of education. And when companies are like, we do this, it's okay, cool, they do this.
Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure. So what should people be looking for when they're sort of evaluating some of these claims?
Well, I think again, certifications aren't a be all end all, but they really, really help.
They do mean
So, yeah. So if you look at something like certified humane, that is shorthand for saying, like, okay, this is a set of standards that they meet. If they say something like GAP rated, there's a set of standards. The thing about GAP that's really cool is they have steps, right? So there's GAP rated, which is sort of GAP level 1. which frankly I don't think is all that. And Gap 2, which is that's where our turkey is, and we wish we could actually have higher welfare turkey than Gap 2, but it practically doesn't exist. So, as I'm sure you know. Turkey's really rough right now. Turkey, in particular, now the turkey market is like really insane.
It is.
But so Gap 2, it's like a step up from that. It's indoors, but it's like, they have a certain square footage. They have, certain like enrichments to their environment, like poultry toys. I don't know what chickens and turkeys play with, but they have that. Step 3 is enhanced outdoor access. Step 4 is pasture centric, which means that it really focuses the life of the animal on the pasture. Step 5 and 5 plus are pretty much exclusively pasture, which you will not see for chicken because everything eats chicken. Right. Chicken has to go inside at some part. But like Gap and Certified Humane, you're going to see those a lot, and you'll almost never see above Gap 3 poultry. In fact, it's even really hard to find Gap 2.
Yeah, I don't know that I have. I've seen quite a few lamb that are Gap 3 and 4.
Oh yeah, most lamb is Gap 3 or 4. We actually have lamb too, and our lamb is Gap 4. Our cows are Gap 4. But yeah, when it comes to poultry, I mean, just because of the density in which they're raised, because of their lifespan, they're generally not going to be in that Gap 4 range, which is why I'm really excited that we're moving to Gap 4. Then there's animal welfare approved, which is another really, really good one. But there are also a lot of certifying bodies that are kind of, they don't really mean a whole lot. So and I wish I remembered what some of them are, but I don't because we don't mess with them. But if you are looking for a seal on a package as your guiding principle for what you're going to buy, make sure you know what that seal means. Oh, I got a visitor. Make sure you know what that seal means. And another thing is I think the most important thing is to be able to ask questions, whether it's the farmer, farmer's market, or the manufacturer. I think with pet food in particular, it's really important to be able to contact the company. And if you have questions about any claims on the package, really trust the person answering to know what they mean.
Yep.
And there have been a lot of times when I've reached out to customer service from different companies. I actually reached out to you guys when I first started ordering for my dog to find out.
You know what? I think I remember that. That was when it was just me answering all the messages, making all the food, shipping all the packages.
You're probably like, who is this? But it is something I really want to know. And what you'll find is most companies, like the customer service people, really don't know how to answer those questions.
Right.
Or they'll use really vague answers that kind of involved a lot of the terms I just said, or they'll say we source humane when possible. Those are when possible are my two least favorite words. So if you see something where it says when possible, just remember it's almost always possible. It's just probably really expensive or difficult.
Yeah, no, and it is. And there is a problem with our agricultural system that I'm not sure anybody really knows how to solve other than through consumer buying power, which is just demanding more. Stop buying stuff that you don't want to eat or feed and try to opt for the things that are important to you. But it's hard, I've never judged anyone.
And you're going to pee through the nose. I mean, that's the problem. I mean, our food is really expensive. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. It really is. And people try to argue with us sometimes or say that's outlandish. And the reality is you get what you pay for. And if you find a food that's claiming to be a lot of things, but it's really inexpensive, you should question that food.
Right. Yep. And I think, there was a saying out there. I can't remember who said it, but it was like, you shouldn't be questioning why the food is so expensive, but why the food you're feeding is so cheap.
It might have been like Marion Nestle or something like that. I don't remember, but I know the exact quote. So actually, you were saying that consumer buying power is the only way. And I do actually want to talk about legislation a little bit. Because you in California have Proposition 12, and it's awesome that the Supreme Court upheld that.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, you didn't mention pork at all.
So
In our,
here's the like we don't make a pork formula. My business partner did a lot of volunteering with pig rescue.
Mhm.
So we get asked a lot, but I have to be honest, like it's probably never happening, just because of that personal connection there. But Prop 12, California, that's awesome. And on the flip side of that, there's a bill proposed in Congress called the EATS Act, and it's like ending. I wrote this down because I never remember what it stands for. It's ending agricultural trade suppression. Now, this is basically like the evil empire response to Prop 12, trying to codify into law, the ability, basically banning any sort of welfare initiative that would affect interstate commerce.
I wonder
This,
who's sponsoring that bill.
it's actually, so originally it's bipartisan, which is
Really?
crazy. Yeah, it was started with a Republican and a Democrat. Now it's mostly, I don't make any assumptions about like any of your audience. Now it mostly has Republican support, but it did start. I was shocked that it started as a bipartisan bill. And
Just so everyone is aware here, Prop 12 in California basically speaks to the standards in which pigs are raised. So making sure they have enough space, much of what you're hearing that we saw that happened in the poultry industry, and not confining them to such a small location, which the reason why so many farmers or many of these big manufacturers are against it is because the more time it takes to raise an animal, the more it costs. And therefore, when that goes out into the market, in the end, the more it's going to also cost the consumer. And it slows down production because of it. But as we know, just like those growth hormones that we're seeing in cows, yes, you can inject them with things to speed up that process, but is that the right thing to do for the animal? So that's what the big sort of controversy is. And it started here in California. I don't know that there are other states that have adopted
there
it.
there are other states that have, I mean, I don't know about that specific law, but actually a lot of states have their own animal welfare legislation. A lot of municipalities have their own legislation, and this is more far reaching than just farm animals. Actually, this would affect puppy mills.
Mm,
So I mean, it's just all kinds of animal welfare laws would be overturned because of this.
yeah.
So if you're the sort of person that writes your Congress, your local congressional representative, I highly recommend that. I think the ASPCA website on their farm, the ASPCA actually has a whole farm welfare branch that nobody knows about, but they actually do focus a lot on welfare for farmed animals as well. And they actually have like even just like a form template that you can just sign online and
Fill it out.
as a petition. So that's actually a really easy, low hanging fruit way
Yeah.
to handle that.
Good to
So
know. Good to know.
yeah.
Something that we try to do here in our facility is really encourage our staff to vote locally, like for your local laws. I don't care who's running for president. You probably don't either. It's not going to make a huge difference.
Probably
But
not.
where that stoplight turns up in down the street, and whether or not you're in traffic or things like this can really make a difference.
Oh yeah, and I actually live in a pretty agricultural county these days, so there
Yeah.
is actually at that local level things can make a difference. But yeah, I mean that EATS Act, it's literally to overturn Prop 12 to codify into law what the Supreme Court said. No, this is really, and I was really happy with that decision. I was actually, I think a lot of people in the welfare space were kind of were holding their breath on that one,
Yeah.
because factory farm pigs. I read this. Basically, those gestation crates that they keep mother pigs in, it's like sitting in an economy airplane seat without the ability to turn around. And we're talking like Frontier or Spirit, not even like Southwest or anything. So just imagine being stuck on an airplane seat and not able to like get up or turn around for your entire life.
Yeah, for sure. No, well, thank you. Thank you for that tip and for really shedding light on this topic. I don't think it's talked about enough generally, but particularly in the pet food world, because for a lot of fresh food companies, it is almost cost prohibitive to enter the space because, and this, this happened to us when we started early on, but a lot of times you have this grand idea and you want to make a product that makes feeding real food easier, more convenient, but you can't always make it affordable. And, you kind of go through all of these steps. And I'm sure in the last 14 years, you learned way more about the meat industry than you ever expected.
Way more than I want to know, to be perfectly honest, like way more than I want to know. And by the way, I feel like we're only scratching the surface here, but
Yeah, no, absolutely. I do want to invite anyone in our audience to ask any questions. Oh my gosh, we're 50 minutes in. I didn't even
every time this happens, like every time I have a Facebook Live, I just like,
yeah, no, but it's great. You really have dropped some really big knowledge bombs. While we're waiting for people to drop in any questions they might have, I do have a good question to ask. This was actually from our staff. They said, can you share a memorable success story or heartwarming experience from an Evermore customer that highlights the impact of your products?
Oh God. I mean, there's so many. Actually, this one is sad, but I love it. And it like makes me tear up every time. We had a customer whose dog had hemangiosarcoma, which is a death sentence. And I want to be completely transparent about this. I'm like really gonna cry. My dog, who seemed super healthy, we did everything right. She actually just collapsed on me one day and she had it. And it was, we had done all of her wellness checks. It never showed up. It's a very, very fast, aggressive cancer. And it's like really hard to do all the right things and something terrible can still happen.
Yeah.
But anyway, around like shortly after or around the same time, one of our customers, or she wasn't our customer, she started buying our food because her dog was diagnosed with HSA. And, every 2 months she would check in with us. She would send us an email with like the oncologist report and the reports about her scan and be like, there's no tumor growth. Like the doctors are shocked. There's no tumor growth. And she just kept sending us emails and I would cry every time. And I would write back and be like, this is making me so happy. Kimmy lived 20 months after her diagnosis. Like something like 5% of dogs live a year. And I know diet like wasn't the only factor, right? There's so many factors. You can't like pick out just one. But she kept saying, like, I really truly believe your food made a difference. And that's my favorite story, but it's also a really sad one.
Yeah, no, but that's beautiful. I think a lot of us get into this industry because of a personal experience very similar to that. But it's also a reminder to you, despite all of the gross things that you had to learn about the meat industry, that what you're doing is making a difference. And
it really does. We get emails every day, to be perfectly honest. And it really just makes it worth it. You know what a grind this is, especially when you're doing things right? It's really easy to do things wrong.
Sure.
It's very hard to do things right.
Yep. Well, I'm really excited to see you in a couple of weeks at the Feed Real Summit. What are you most excited about?
About the summit or just in general? Yeah. Okay. First of all, I'm excited about reconnecting with all the other vendors because I know most of you and really good people. And I know so everyone visit the vendor booths and you have some amazing panelists and speakers. So I'm really excited about the speakers. I'm really excited to see Rodney again. I'm so excited about Dr. Royal. Like, oh my God. You were at Healthy Dog Expo. She's amazing.
She is.
So I'm really excited.
And I've had the pleasure of corresponding with her about, her coming. And I'm just like, this is unreal.
She's incredible. So I'm so excited about seeing her again. You have so many great panelists. And yeah, people that I've seen them online, seen them speak, but never gotten to meet in person. So yeah, I'm just excited about being there. And also we made these stickers. I'm really excited I got to make stickers.
Yes.
They're,
All right.
they're
Well,
all our dogs, all the company dogs.
you guys are going to get stickers. You're going to get a bunch of stuff. For those of you that already have your tickets for the summit, get excited because it's right around the corner. And if you haven't gotten yours yet, there are still a few left at feedreal.com/summit. Thank you so much again, Hanna, for joining us. It has been a pleasure having you on.
Thank you. Really, likewise.
Yes, awesome. Well, make sure you guys take down those little nuggets that she gave us, and we will catch you again soon. Bye.
Bye.